Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Coker-Hook. So this evening, you know, we live here in Silicon Valley, and one of the things I really get excited about being in Silicon Valley is the fact that there's such an international flavor here. We've got business that's done from here all over the world. We've got people from all cultures. You just can walk down the streets of San Francisco or San Jose and hear 5 or 10 different languages in like 2 or 3 block radius. And what's interesting to me about that is that each one of these countries, the people from those countries have a different way of approaching things, like the way they do business and whatnot. We travel a lot for business here from the Valley. We travel a lot for pleasure here from the Valley. And the question is, how do we present ourselves when we're in other people's backyards? So to talk to me about that tonight is a good friend of mine by the name of Lanie Denslow, who has a company called Worldwise. Good evening, Lanie. Welcome to Reference Point.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, the thing that everybody needs to know about you is that you provide consultative services to people, business people and others who are traveling, about these cultural differences and how that impacts the way that you're perceived when you're doing business. And I don't know that we always think about that when we're going to travel, do we?
No, I don't think most people from any place in the world think about it. You just go and do what you normally do.
And that's the key, what you normally do.
Right.
Right. And how does that impact things?
Well, sometimes it's perfect, but other times it's not at all, because people do things differently in different parts of the world. They think differently. You know, we talk about cultural differences. It's sort of a big catchphrase. Mm-hmm. But really, what you think about is that culture is how people answer the question, how am I supposed to live my life? How am I supposed to communicate and make friends and do my business? Mm-hmm. And there are different ways that questions answered around the world.
Right. And that feeds right into the issue of, if I'm an American going to Asia or going to South America or going to Europe and I want to do business with somebody in those locations, how sensitive do I have to be to whatever it is that the way they look at things?
Well, it's good if you know what might be similar or different to the way you do business.
Okay.
So that one of the issues that comes up is people expect everybody to do things the same way, to have the same sense of what it means to be on time. Uh-huh. You know, here where be on time means if it's a 10 o'clock meeting, you're there at 10 o'clock. But in the Middle East, in Latin America, even sometimes in Europe, 10 o'clock meeting, you know, might start at 10:20, 5 after 10. But if you're in Germany or Switzerland, it will start absolutely at 10 o'clock. So you need to have some idea what might be some of the similarities or differences.
Got it. Now, you were mentioning at a meeting that you and I had an opportunity to be at together, that you had done some sort of conversations and actually like a survey with people from other countries regarding their perceptions of what it means to be doing business with Americans, right?
Right.
And that was fascinating to me, and I think it's one of those real eye-openers, because like you said, we just kind of do what we do because this is how we grew up, and this is how I learned how to do business here in the States. But people from other parts of the world don't look at us the same way, do they?
Well, how we do business is different than almost any place in the world. And so we are a big country, and we've always had a big market, and it's really relatively recent that we've done business around the globe. We could do business between LA and New York, or we could do business in Canada, or we could do a business in Mexico. But every place else, that was ROW, the rest of the world, like a mysterious place. Uh-huh. But that's not true anymore. So we need not only to know how other people do things, but it's useful to understand what surprises people about us. Uh-huh. So I'll tell you a little story. I did do a survey, and it started because I was doing some work with the Australian Trade Commission, doing a series about working with Americans to help get people from Australia who are thinking about coming to the U.S. ready to come.
Okay.
And out of all those conversations, I was really surprised to hear what things surprise people. So I thought, well, I wonder if it's just the Australians? Or is this true for other people? So I set about doing a little survey. And I ended up talking to people from, I think, 14 different countries. People from the consulates, trade commissioners, business people like us, protocol officers, people who worked with people crossing borders. Mm-hmm. And when I got all done, you know, I had a stack of documents like this.
Right.
And you heard me say, I was really curious to see, well, were there some points of agreement?
Things that were similar amongst all of those 14 countries.
Yeah, I asked them, tell me 3 things that you tell people from your country who are thinking about coming here to work or to consult or to buy a business. And then I also asked them what 3 things to know about going to work in their country.
Okay.
But let's talk first about what they said about working with Americans. So I think we talked about there were 5 things. So the first thing was Americans seem friendly, but they're really not. You can't, but what's worse
they seem friendly, but they're really not. Uh-huh.
And that you can't believe what Americans say. And I thought, really? That's appalling. Uh-huh. And then I went back to all my notes because I was really curious about what awful thing were we doing that made people say that. So there was nothing about we didn't abide by agreements in contracts and nothing about we didn't pay our bills. It all came back to 3 familiar phrases. And they're the kind of phrases we use when we go to a meeting or a conference, and they are, as we're leaving, we often say to each other, oh, I'll give you a call. Mm-hmm. Let's get together. Or the famous, oh, let's do lunch.
Right.
And then people would say to me, and there were no calls, and there was no getting together, and there was no lunch. Ah. One woman had tears in her eyes, and she said, I was so disappointed. I was new here from London. And out of that, people formed an opinion that Americans are superficially friendly and that they don't say what they mean. That's pretty devastating when you're walking in to do business with somebody and that's already in your mind.
Yeah, that could make it real hard to actually negotiate an agreement.
It can. So that was the first one. The other ones were not so shocking. It was, let me think about this for a minute. Your country is big, diverse, and complex. Every American knows that already. It was, marketing is absolutely essential. You have to really shout out what you do, tell people who you are. Even in an interview session, in an interview looking for a job or a consulting opportunity, you have to really be able to tell people what you do that's special.
Right.
Let me think about what were the other ones. Big, diverse. Oh, yes. The one that I think makes a huge difference and is the source of lots of problems is, for Americans, the clock is king.
Right.
We are about schedules, deadlines, and doing things in order. Don't get off the agenda in a meeting. Uh-huh. And the last one is if you're invited to a breakfast, lunch, or dinner, if you're lucky enough to get that invitation, remember it's not about the food and it's not about the people around the table. It's all about business. A business meal
Meaning
is
here
about
in the States.
business.
It's a business meeting is about business, right?
Yep.
Right. But that's not necessarily the way they approach things in other parts of the world, is it?
No. Do you want me to go through the
Oh, yeah,
key,
I'd love to hear
the key
that.
points?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what did people say from these 14 different countries? Now, mind you, they were as different as Switzerland and Hong Kong and South Africa and Spain and France, Canada. So they said, the clock is not always king. Please understand that for some of us, schedules are more flexible. And that's a really interesting and important point when you're thinking about traveling for business. Mm-hmm. We'll be happy to help you. And if you want to know something about our market or our competitors, we'll be glad to share. But when we tell you something, please believe us. really do know what we're doing here. It would be good if you knew something about our history and our culture before you came. And tone down your marketing if you're an American coming.
So they don't want to be pitched. They
want to hear what you have to say, but not this super aggressive, in your face. The first thing you do is come in and hit them with all the data and facts about why your product is superb.
Right.
And the last thing really relates to that in a way is when we invite you to a business lunch or dinner, it's not about the food and it's not about business. It's all about getting to know the people you're with. Most other countries are very relationship focused. Excuse me.
Well, you know, that's actually, we talk about here in the U.S. when you're looking at a lot of the literature these days about how you do business and how you maintain a company and grow a company, they talk about the relationship as being important, the relationship with your staff, the relationship with your customers, the relationship with your suppliers and that sort of thing. But it sounds like that has been at the core of what people often do in other countries, and we're just kind of getting our wrapping our wits around that here in the States.
I think I think that's a good way of thinking about it, because we are time focused. We're in a hurry. We want to get it done, do it now, move on. And we have relationships. That's always been true, but they're often compartmentalized. So I have my group at the office. So I might say I have some friends at the office. I have the friends at the gym where I work out in the morning. I have the friends who are the parents of the other children in the soccer team that my children play on.
Right.
I might have friends at the Rotary that I belong to. But it's unusual for those friends to come together. They might show up at your house once a year for a holiday cocktail party.
Right.
You know, you go to those parties where you see people once a year.
Yeah, exactly.
But for most of the rest of the world, people have long-standing friendships where they do things together all the time, and their business and social networks are often linked together. So you might see the same people at the office and on the weekend and go on vacation. So you have a different sense of relationship. You really know those people and how they think in a different way than when you know your friends at the gym and you talk about certain things at the gym, how the Warriors are doing.
Right.
And then you have other friends that maybe you've known for a long time and you have different conversations with them. So there's a difference, a deepness of the relationships that we don't generally have.
Do we find those kinds of differences even within the U.S.? I mean, like you said, we're a big country, and the Northerners and the Southerners and the Westerners and the Midwesterners and all that sort of thing?
Well, I come from L.A., and people often say that people in L.A. have no real relationships. They just have temporary connections because historically there is so much turnover is the word that comes to mind, but it's not exactly right. But people move in and out.
Right.
You know, and I think that's true up here too, to a certain extent. There are a lot of new people coming all the time, attracted by jobs and great weather. So I think you find differences around the country in how relationships are developed. And I can think about, you know, in some parts of the country, people live where they grew up and went to school, and they still have friends from high school.
And they're staying in the same area for their whole life. Yeah.
But being able to move around is really one of the key characteristics, I think, of the American culture. I always think about it as if you move to LA and it doesn't work out for you, you know, you just pick up and you can go to Boston and start fresh.
Yeah.
We're very accepting of people coming in, starting up, building a network.
Right.
And so people don't always have those deep, long-standing roots.
That's true. I want to mention that you've actually have a couple of books that you have written on the kind of topics that we're talking about. I'm going to hold them up here. Maybe the guys can pull it on the camera. One is, which one was the first one? This one?
This was the first
one. This one was the first one. It says, it's called Working with Americans, How to Build Profitable Business Relationships. And I'll point it this way. And that's exactly, we were talking about relationships. And that is really interesting because I've had a limited amount of opportunity to do international business travel. And I can totally see that. I was with a gentleman in Croatia at one point. He was worked with a company, sold a product, a software product that my company had at the time. And I'd go over there, he'd take me to his house, meet his children. We went on to this island where I met his father, and they cooked dinner, and it was just like, who are these people? You know, it's not what you do. At least that's not what we do here in the States. But it was really interesting. So I totally relate to that.
That was, that was the thinking behind actually both books, that if there was a way to get people to understand what the differences are and the thinking behind them, then people could start to feel comfortable and curious, learn some more about each other, and be able to bridge some of those differences.
Great. And then the second book is more about what it's called Worldwide.
It's a look out into the world.
What to know before you go, which actually is a very interesting concept, because a lot of times we just, in the U.S., it's shoot first and ask questions later, right?
There you go.
It's a Wild West kind of an attitude. And this is talking about things you probably ought to know before you actually get on the plane and you know, get off the plane in Tokyo or someplace like that.
That's the idea.
Let's talk about that sort of thing for a minute, because one of the things that, you know, we have hopefully a lot of business people that are watching the show, and even if they're just casual travelers, there are some things to know how to comport yourself so that you are not offending people, because there's little things that can kind of get on people's nerves. And we talked about a couple of them here before the show. One of them had to do with business cards, right?
Okay, so let's talk about business cards, and then we'll come back to some other things.
Okay.
So business cards are really part of that initial connection you make with people as a business person. Mm-hmm. It's your handshake, you say a few words, and then you exchange a piece of paper.
Right.
It's sort of a hope that we're going to be connected beyond this point.
Right.
So the Americans are very transactional. We're all about doing business. So we call this piece of paper a business card, because that's how we think about it. Here's my card. It tells you what my phone number, email address, website. So you can call me and we can do a deal. I'm going to take the card back for a minute. So most cards, my card's a little different. It's vertical. Right. But most cards are horizontal.
Right.
And people tend to be extraordinarily casual about handing your business card.
Right.
You know, it's not quite throw it like a Frisbee, but it's not so far off. And people don't think about it. They just hand you their card.
Right.
Now,
and a lot of times you don't even look at it.
You don't look at it. Can I have your card?
Sure.
If I do it this way, I cover up your name.
Right.
I'm not even looking at it. So I advise my clients that when you're giving someone your business card, you hold it in the corner and hand it to them in a way that makes sure that your name is facing them.
Oh, you know, which is actually interesting, because I've never even thought.
Yeah, you want to give it to me so I can see your name, because who among us is really good at remembering names? I've never talked to very many business people who don't say, oh God, I wish I could remember names better. Make it easy for your friends or your new friends.
Right.
Show it to them with your name.
Got it.
And then you take it with the bottom so you can still see your name.
Right. Very cool.
And then you want to have something to put it in. Now you guys all have these great pockets in your jackets. Mm-hmm. Now, for some reason, no one's ever heard that a woman needed a pocket. I have no idea what that's about. But you then want to have a business card holder. Mm-hmm. And can we just do some minutia for a minute?
Sure.
So a really good business card holder has two sides, where you can keep your card in one side, and the other card you put the cards you receive. Mm. It seems a little over the top, Lanie. I mean, really. But think about it. If you have a business card holder, I get your card. I put your card in with mine. I'm talking to somebody, I go reach for the card at the back, and the next thing I know, they're looking at me because they know my name is not Dave.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, one thing to think about. But continuing our international theme, if Americans, and we're using ourselves as the example, talk about this as a business card, this piece of paper. If you're in Asia, this piece of paper is a name card. It's about the person because it has information that's important to know about this person that you're going to do business with. It tells you not just their phone number, but tells you what company they work for, and that's important to know. Tells you their title, so you know something about where their level is within the company. And then it tells you their name and their contact information.
That's an interesting point, because a lot of times here in the U.S., the cards are coming out without titles or with weird titles. I'm a, whatever it happens to be.
I'm the director of network engagement.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, exactly. But I'm taking from what you said that in Asian cultures, the title on the card actually has significance relative to that individual.
Yeah, it's their title. It's like the old days when it was really a big deal to be a vice president of something,
right? Not
the manager of network engagement. So that it was generally understood that it established your place within the company.
Yeah.
So, and if you stay with the idea that this piece of paper is a name card, and for me, this is telling you something about me. I am sharing something, not casually suggesting you call me. So business cards are given with two hands. Think of it as a gift. A gift in Asia would be given with two hands. It's presented to you.
When you say Asia, that is not just China, but it's Japan, Thailand, Korea.
Yeah. And you have to remember there are significant differences in the culture of each of the countries in Southeast, Northeast, all through Asia, just like there are in the countries in Europe.
Sure.
But we tend to think of that as one block.
Yeah.
But when it comes to business cards, it's a gift.
It's a gift.
So
you
get your card.
Get my card.
So people think, oh, well, I can't do that. Well, of course you can. So remember what we talked about. You want perfect. You want your name to face.
Facing the other person.
So I'm giving it to you. Now, at one point, this always reminds me of a tightrope. You have to let go of one hand, take the card, and then you put...
You want to grab it again.
Grab it so that you're receiving it with two hands. You pull it toward you, and the most important thing is you look at it.
Okay.
You want to see who this is. Now, if you're in a meeting, you're going to put that on the table in front of you.
Got it.
And in a meeting, you might have 3 or 4 cards from 3 or 4 different people, and it's helpful if they're organized in the way people are sitting around the table. But that's something to know about business cards. I'm giving you your card.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So,
but we started to talk about travelers. But
yes,
go
we
ahead.
did. But before you go on, I'm gonna make a request of you because we're running down to the point where we only have a couple minutes left in the show here, and I'm wondering if you could stick around a little bit and then and do another conversation with us here when we wrap up this one and start again and continue this discussion on these things.
It'd be a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Okay, good. So let's go and you were going to say we were going to go back to.
Travelers?
Yes, travelers.
Travelers. Okay, so there are some small things about travel that will just make it easier if you know some things. One thing is always know what time is dinner wherever you're going. Because
I can kind of relate to that. My daughter went to high school with a number of friends from India, and when they invited us over for dinner, we were figuring 6 o'clock, and the food didn't even come out until like 9:30 or 10. And it's like I'm hungry. How am I? It was.
Let me tell you a story related to food and time and adapting. So, quite a few years ago, I did some consulting, some marketing consulting for a firm that was an architectural firm that was starting to do some business in Mexico, and we had a partner in Mexico, so we went down for a meeting. And we got there and there was no time. We'd had lunch, but there was no time. So we went thinking the meeting started at 5 o'clock, which for us was a little odd, but never mind. And then it just went on and on and on and on and on. And we were starving. And like you, we went to dinner at 9 o'clock. So the people we were with were really lovely people. And there must have been some conversation at dinner about this isn't normal for us. So the next time we went, we were very careful, and about 4 o'clock we had a snack. And we went and we had a meeting, and at 7:30 they said, okay, let's go to dinner. And we weren't hungry. And we were the only people in the restaurant. People trying to be thoughtful.
Trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So one thing to keep an eye on.
Well, I want to mention that when we come back and have the next level of conversation, I want to talk about some of the, we have some interesting things that are going on right now globally. And so, and if we're traveling, what are some of the things that we need to be understanding of with respect to, if I'm going to France, or if I'm going to South Africa, or if I'm going to Taiwan, what are some of the things I need to think about as a businessman to be cognizant of from a appreciation for the culture and how they deal with everything from being things that are socially acceptable or not socially acceptable and whatever. So because we've got just a few seconds left in the show here and this time, but I want to get back into talking about some of these other things when we come back. So quick wrap up. A couple of awesome books for people to know about that Lanie has, because if you ever do any traveling, you may need to know about some of this stuff. Both, the other thing I want to talk about when we get back is personal travel as opposed to business travel. But thank you, Lanie, for opening our eyes here. And we'll have an opportunity to have a little bit more conversation and dig into some of these other cool little tools and toys you've got down here that people can't see. But we'll talk about that when we come back. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Reference Point.